in the rugged, sun-drenched hills of the Sichuan province, amidst the ancient lands that would eventually witness the rise and fall of empires. Lady Wang's story began long before she became a matriarch of legend. The winds that swept across the mountain passes whispered of change and upheaval. And it was in this volatile environment that a child was born, destined to change the course of history. Lady Wang's birth was neither foretold by sages nor heralded by extraordinary omens. But it was in her early years that the seeds of greatness were sown. Born into a family of noble heritage, her lineage was proud, steeped in the wisdom and tradition of ancient China. Though it was not the title of her family that would come to define her, but the power of her intellect, her character, and her unwavering influence over one of the greatest strategists China would ever know. Her father, Wang Fu, was a scholar, a man of deep learning and ambition. He recognized the value of education and knowledge, both as a means of personal development and as the cornerstone of a strong and enduring legacy. From an early age, Lady Wang, though a woman, was given the same opportunities to study and learn as her brothers. Her mind, sharp as the edge of a sword, absorbed the teachings of Confucianism, Taoism, and the ancient texts on strategy and governance. These were not merely lessons from books, but a way of life, ingrained into her being as she sat at her father's feet, listening intently as he discussed the complexities of human nature and the art of leading with wisdom. She was not a mere pupil, she was a keen observer. One who internalized the lessons of her father, contemplating them in the stillness of the nights, when the world around her was quiet and full of secrets. As a young girl, she displayed a quiet strength that went unnoticed by many. She learned early on that true power often resided not in what one could command with force, but in the subtle manipulation of circumstance, the patient weaving of threads in the great tapestry of life. Her father was a man of few words, but his lessons were clear. A person of true wisdom knew how to adapt, how to remain calm amidst chaos, and how to influence the course of events without appearing to do so. The local village, nestled in the shadow of the Grand Mountains, was a place of simplicity and peace. The people there lived their lives in rhythm with the land, their days measured by the cycles of planting and harvest. Lady Wang grew up alongside them, learning the value of hard work, humility, and compassion. However, she was also aware of the larger world beyond her quiet village, of the turbulent times that brewed on the horizon, the shifting allegiances, and the fractured states of the great land of China. The stories of warriors, emperors, and strategists who shaped the fate of kingdoms were never far from her mind. And as the winds of destiny began to stir, she knew that the path before her would not remain still for long. Her mother, Lady Zhang, was a quiet but formidable force in Lady Wang's life. A woman who understood the subtleties of diplomacy and the complexities of nurturing a child destined for greatness. She taught Lady Wang not only the virtues of grace and humility but also the importance of strength and resilience in a world where women were often seen but not heard. Lady Zhang's wisdom was equally revered by those who knew her, and her quiet counsel was often sought by the men of the village. Though they would never openly admit it, she instilled in her daughter the belief that true power lay not in outward demonstrations but in the inner strength to endure and to guide those around her with a steady hand. As Lady Wang matured, it became clear to all who knew her that she was no ordinary woman. There was a quiet dignity in the way she moved, a serenity in her demeanor that belied the fierce intelligence that burned beneath the surface. Her father often referred to her as the jewel of his house, a title that filled her with both pride and a deep sense of responsibility. It was in these formative years that Lady Wang began to understand the weight of her potential. And with this understanding came a quiet determination to shape the future, not just for herself, but for those whose fates would be intertwined with hers. And it was this quiet resolve, the wisdom gleaned from her father's teachings and her mother's nurturing, that would later guide her son, Zhuge Liang, through the trials and triumphs that awaited him. For it was not only Zhuge Liang's extraordinary brilliance that would define his legacy, but the values instilled in him by the woman who shaped his early years. It was Lady Wang who, long before Zhuge Liang became the legendary strategist, ensured that he was not just a man of great intellect but also one of unwavering moral character, whose decisions would echo through the annals of history. In the years to come, Lady Wang's role in shaping her son's destiny would prove to be as crucial as any battle fought on the field. She would not be a warrior in the traditional sense. But her wisdom would be the sword that guided Zhuge Liang, the shield that protected him when enemies encircled him, and the heart that sustained him through the trials of leadership. Her influence, though not always visible, would be felt in every strategy he devised, in every decision he made, and in every victory he achieved. And so, as Lady Wang's early years unfolded amidst the quiet beauty of the Sichuan Mountains, the foundations were laid for a legacy that would reverberate through the corridors of history. It was a legacy built not on the flash of swords or the roar of armies, but on the steady and unyielding strength of a mother's love, a mother's wisdom, and a mother's quiet influence over the greatest strategist China would ever know. As Lady Wang reached adolescence, her life, like many others, was soon to be shaped by the tumultuous events that were beginning to unfold in the lands around her. The peace and simplicity she had known in her early childhood began to fray as whispers of war and rebellion reached even the quietest corners of her world. The Han Dynasty, once the unifying force in China, was crumbling under the weight of corruption, intrigue, and military conflict. The kingdom was splintering into factions, each vying for dominance as the chaos of the Three Kingdoms period loomed on the horizon. It was during these years, when the land around her was filled with uncertainty, that Lady Wang's intellect and understanding of the world deepened. The quiet beauty of her village remained, but she was now more attuned to the larger political and military movements that were sweeping through the empire. Her father, ever the scholar, spent hours reading the writings of the ancients, while also advising local leaders about the impending threat to the kingdom. She often overheard these conversations, noting how the once stable world of her youth was crumbling, and how those with power were making decisions that would shape the fate of the land. Though she was still a young woman, Lady Wang felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. She knew that the world she lived in was changing, and she could not remain a passive observer. Her mind, already sharpened by years of study, began to grasp the complexities of governance and leadership. She would soon become a woman who not only understood the intricacies of military strategy and political maneuvering but also how to navigate the dangers of a world filled with ambition, deceit, and betrayal. By the time she reached adulthood, Lady Wang's reputation had begun to spread beyond the village. Her wisdom, strength, and knowledge became widely known, not only among the common folk but also among the influential figures who sought her counsel. It was said that even the most powerful men would listen intently to her advice, often leaving her home with a new perspective on the issues they faced. Despite the societal norms of the time, which generally relegated women to the background, Lady Wang's brilliance and influence could not be ignored. Her marriage to Zhuge Liang's father, Zhuge Xian, was both a union of love and one of necessity. Zhuge Xian was a man of ambition, keenly aware of the shifting tides of the political landscape. He knew that aligning himself with Lady Wang and her family would provide both strategic advantage and stability. Though Zhuge Liang's father was an important figure, it was clear from the outset that Lady Wang's intelligence and wisdom would have a profound influence on their family's future. The birth of Zhuge Liang, or as he would later be known, the revered Kongming, was a momentous event not only for Lady Wang but for the entire family. From the moment he was born, Lady Wang knew that her son was different. His eyes, even as a newborn, sparkled with a unique depth, as though he could already see the world in ways others could not. His mind, she believed, would one day shape the future of China, but his journey would require much guidance. Lady Wang took it upon herself to nurture his intellect, guiding him through the complexities of both Confucian principles and military strategy. Her lessons, delivered with patience and care, focused not only on the importance of knowledge but also on the virtue of ethics. She knew that her son's brilliance was a gift, but it was his character, his moral compass, that would set him apart as a leader. From an early age, Zhuge Liang exhibited an insatiable curiosity and an innate ability to understand the world around him. He would spend hours in the family library, poring over texts of military strategy, philosophy, and governance. Lady Wang, seeing her son's growing aptitude, encouraged him to study the ancient masters, such as Sun Tzu, whose Art of War would later become one of Zhuge Liang's most valued texts. She also introduced him to the teachings of Confucius, ensuring that he understood the importance of righteousness, loyalty, and the well-being of the people. It was clear that Zhuge Liang had inherited his mother's sharp mind and her thirst for knowledge. However, Lady Wang was also keenly aware of the dangers that could arise from such brilliance. She taught him the importance of temperance and restraint, warning him that while knowledge was a great power, it could also be a double-edged sword if wielded recklessly. True wisdom, she often said, is not in knowing everything, but in knowing when and how to use what you know. In the quiet hours of the evening, when the sounds of the world outside seemed distant, Lady Wang would sit with her son, speaking to him of the virtues that would guide him through life. She spoke of loyalty to the state, of honor in battle, and of compassion for the people. She reminded him that a true leader was not one who sought power for its own sake, but one who sacrificed personal gain for the greater good. These lessons would stay with Zhuge Liang throughout his life, guiding him even when the path ahead seemed unclear. Lady Wang also impressed upon her son the importance of patience. The world, she told him, was filled with noise and distractions, but true success came to those who could wait for the right moment. Like a bow drawn tight, she said, the arrow does not fly until the hand releases it. So too must you wait for the right moment to strike. As Zhuge Liang grew, it became evident that he was not only learning from his mother's lessons, but he was also internalizing the deeper meanings of these teachings. He began to think critically about the world around him, questioning the motivations of those in power and analyzing the strategies employed by rulers and generals throughout history. Yet, it was not only his intellect that distinguished him, but his ability to remain calm in the face of adversity. Lady Wang's teachings had instilled in him a sense of inner peace, a quality that would serve him well in the years to come as he faced the trials and tribulations of war and governance. Lady Wang's influence on her son would continue to grow as he matured. But the foundation had already been laid. In her, Zhuge Liang found not only a mother but a mentor, a guide who shaped his character and his destiny. The wisdom she imparted to him would, in time, prove invaluable as he took on the mantle of leadership, guiding the kingdom of Shu through the turbulent years of the Three Kingdoms period. Yet, Lady Wang's influence went beyond the personal sphere. Her quiet strength, her ability to read the room, to understand the dynamics of power and human nature, would serve as a model for Zhuge Liang's future interactions with allies and enemies alike. Though she was not a general or warrior, her strategic mind and diplomatic skills were integral to the future successes of her son. Her legacy was woven into every decision Zhuge Liang made, every victory he won, and every loss he endured. As Lady Wang continued to guide her son, it became clear that her greatest contribution was not just in shaping his mind but in nurturing his heart. She prepared him not only for battle but for leadership in a fractured world. In the years that followed, Zhuge Liang would come to embody the very ideals that his mother had instilled in him: integrity, wisdom, patience, and loyalty. These were the qualities that would make him one of the most revered figures in Chinese history. A man whose influence would extend far beyond his lifetime. The winds of change were sweeping across China as Zhuge Liang entered his adolescent years. The once stable empire of the Han Dynasty was in the midst of a slow but inevitable collapse. Warlords rose, and armies clashed for dominance as the nation teetered on the edge of chaos. But for young Zhuge Liang, a boy still in his formative years, the outside world seemed distant. His mind was firmly rooted in the teachings of his mother, Lady Wang, whose wisdom had begun to mold his character into something extraordinary. From a young age, Zhuge Liang exhibited an intellectual curiosity far beyond that of his peers. While other children his age were more interested in games or the company of friends, Zhuge Liang spent hours in the family library, poring over scrolls and texts that spanned a variety of subjects. His mind, sharp as the finest blade, absorbed knowledge with an ease that left even the scholars who visited the Wang household in awe. Lady Wang, ever observant, had long recognized her son's potential, but rather than simply fostering his natural abilities, she focused on shaping his character, instilling in him a deep sense of responsibility and understanding of the world's complexities. While other mothers might have encouraged their children to focus solely on scholarly pursuits, Lady Wang knew that true greatness came from balancing intellect with wisdom, compassion, and moral integrity. She began to teach Zhuge Liang the philosophy of leadership, not just from books, but through real-life examples and the principles of justice, honor, and sacrifice. In these early years, Zhuge Liang learned not only how to think strategically but also how to navigate the complexities of human nature. Lady Wang emphasized the importance of humility, patience, and foresight. She taught him that while intellect could win battles, wisdom was the key to winning hearts and minds. Greatness is not just about conquering lands, my son, she would tell him in their quiet moments together. It is about winning over the hearts of the people, understanding their needs, and protecting them from the forces that would destroy them. A leader must not only be a master of strategy but also a master of character. Zhuge Liang, a quiet and introspective child, absorbed his mother's words deeply. He was not like many of the young noblemen his age, whose heads were filled with dreams of glory and conquest. Instead, he harbored a quiet resolve, an understanding that his true path lay not in seeking fame but in serving the greater good of the people. By the time Zhuge Liang reached his teenage years, it was clear that he had inherited not only his mother's sharp intellect but also her unwavering moral compass. His reputation as a brilliant scholar had begun to spread throughout the region. But what set him apart was his calm demeanor and his ability to listen. He was not driven by ego, as many young men of his status were, but by a sense of duty, a duty that was instilled in him from the very first days of his life. In the evenings, when the setting sun cast long shadows over the family courtyard, Lady Wang would often sit beside her son, watching the way he carefully analyzed the texts in front of him. She had long recognized that his brilliance lay not in any single area of study, but in his ability to synthesize different ideas and concepts into a cohesive whole. Whether it was military strategy, philosophy, or governance, Zhuge Liang's mind was constantly seeking connections, trying to understand how the world worked on a deeper level. Remember, my son, she would say, it is not enough to understand one thing. A great mind must see the connections between all things. In this way, you will understand not only the strategy of war but the way of life itself. It was during these formative years that Zhuge Liang's character began to take shape, guided by the wisdom of his mother. Tempered by the challenges of a world on the brink of collapse, Lady Wang knew that Zhuge Liang's time would come, but she also understood the importance of patience. She never rushed his development. Instead, she let him grow at his own pace, trusting that the lessons she imparted would be enough to guide him when the time was right. While Lady Wang focused on shaping his character, the events unfolding in the kingdom would soon force Zhuge Liang to confront the reality of the world he would one day inherit. The rise of the warlord Dong Zhou, the subsequent rebellions, and the formation of rival factions would soon set the stage for Zhuge Liang's entry into the political sphere. One evening, when Zhuge Liang was nearing the age of 16, Lady Wang spoke to him of the future in a way she had never done before. She knew that the world around them was changing, and that Zhuge Liang's future would be filled with challenges unlike anything they had ever imagined. My son, she said gently, the time is coming when you will be called to serve. The world is in turmoil, and it is only those with wisdom who will navigate these troubled times. You must be ready, not just in mind, but in heart. Your loyalty must lie with the people, not with any individual. In the coming years, you will find that leaders may rise and fall, but it is the people who suffer the most. Never forget that. Zhuge Liang looked at his mother, his eyes filled with a quiet determination. Though he was young, he understood the weight of her words. In that moment, he knew that his path would not be an easy one, but it was the path he was destined to walk. As the years passed, Zhuge Liang continued to study under his mother's watchful eye. His reputation as a scholar grew, but so too did his reputation as a man of integrity and character. He was not simply a brilliant strategist, he was a man who understood the importance of morality and righteousness. While others of his age were focused on military power and personal gain, Zhuge Liang's heart remained rooted in the values his mother had instilled in him. But the world was not waiting for him to grow any older. As the forces of rebellion began to rise, the need for a leader like Zhuge Liang became more urgent. It was in these turbulent times that Lady Wang's teachings would prove to be the foundation upon which Zhuge Liang would build his legacy. He was not just a man of intellect, he was a man of character. And it would be this strength of character that would see him through the challenges ahead. Zhuge Liang's time had come. The world of warlords, Rival factions and shifting alliances awaited him. But even as he prepared to step into the chaos, Lady Wang's voice echoed in his mind. A leader's path is not an easy one, but it is a noble one. Never lose sight of who you are, and never forget the people you serve. As the years passed, the world around Zhuge Liang began to shift in a manner that could not be ignored. Though the turmoil of the Han Dynasty had been a distant echo during his early childhood, it was now crashing violently against the shores of his reality. The struggle for power, led by powerful warlords like Cao Cao, Sun Quan, and Liu Bei, was intensifying with each passing year. The question of who would inherit the throne and reunify China was a matter of both ambition and survival. Yet, through it all, Zhuge Liang remained steadfast in his studies and the principles instilled by Lady Wang. In the quiet evenings, his mother's voice guided him, reminding him of the virtues that should always come before victory. She spoke often of strategy, but equally of the morality behind it. Strategy is not the mere art of war, she would say, but the ability to see beyond the battlefield and recognize the hearts of the people. Zhuge Liang had long internalized these lessons, and as the power struggles among the warlords escalated, he understood more than ever the complexities of leadership. The political landscape of China had fractured, and those who sought power through brute force were often blind to the deeper needs of the people they sought to rule. It was clear to Zhuge Liang that the wisdom of governance was just as crucial as military prowess. He had seen the arrogance of powerful men, those who sought to conquer the land for personal gain without ever considering the costs to the common people. To him, the idea of ruling through fear and domination was not only flawed, but ultimately unsustainable. His mother's teachings rang louder in his mind: to rule well, you must first understand the people. Without their trust, power is but a hollow shell. His reflections on these ideas came to a head as he neared adulthood, when the question of service to the kingdom became ever more pressing. The warlord Liu Bei, who had come to embody the ideals of righteousness and benevolence, was on the rise. Zhuge Liang knew that Liu Bei's cause, though still small compared to the might of Cao Cao, was one that aligned with his own values, one that focused not just on conquest, but on restoring harmony to a fractured China. At the age of 20, Zhuge Liang's reputation as a scholar and a man of integrity had already spread across the region. Scholars and ministers alike sought his counsel, and he became well known for his insightful commentary on governance and the political landscape. However, Zhuge Liang had yet to engage directly in the political and military affairs of the world outside the walls of his home. Lady Wang, despite her own deep understanding of the world's complexities, understood that the time had come for her son to step beyond the safety of their estate and into the storm that awaited him. One fateful day, a messenger arrived at the Wang household. The letter was from Liu Bei himself, inviting Zhuge Liang to join him in his quest to restore the Han Dynasty and bring stability to the land. Liu Bei had heard of Zhuge Liang's brilliance and sought to make him a key advisor. It was an offer that could not be refused, but it was also one that would test Zhuge Liang in ways his studies and quiet life had never prepared him for. Zhuge Liang's heart wavered for only a moment. He knew that his destiny was calling him. It was time to leave the safety of his mother's teachings and step into a world of war, intrigue, and difficult choices. Before he left, Lady Wang called him to her side. In their final conversation, her words were simple but profound. "My son, remember that power is fleeting, but wisdom endures. The world will test you, and the path will not always be clear. But if you hold true to the values of righteousness, loyalty, and compassion, your actions will always reflect the greatness within you." Zhuge Liang looked into his mother's eyes, feeling the weight of her wisdom and her love. He had learned to listen to his heart. And now, as he stood on the precipice of a new chapter in his life, he knew that her teachings would be his guide. He was no longer a boy hidden behind the walls of a quiet home. He was a man who was about to embark on a journey that would forever change the course of history. With a final bow of respect to his mother, Zhuge Liang left the home that had nurtured him. Stepping into the uncertain future, he rode swiftly toward the forces of Liu Bei, knowing that the road ahead would be filled with challenges, battles, and moral dilemmas, but he also understood that this was the moment he had been preparing for all his life. His first meeting with Liu Bei was nothing short of legendary. Despite the young age of Zhuge Liang, Liu Bei immediately recognized his brilliance and deep sense of honor. The two men, bound by a shared vision of restoring the Han Dynasty and uniting the fractured empire, quickly forged a bond of mutual respect. But it was not just Zhuge Liang's intellect that impressed Liu Bei. It was his unwavering sense of righteousness and his commitment to the people. "I have heard of your wisdom, Zhuge Liang," Liu Bei said during their first meeting. "But it is your heart that I need most of all. Your mind can win battles, but your soul will help us win the future." Zhuge Liang bowed deeply. "I am but a servant of the people. My lord, I will offer what little I can to bring stability and peace to our land." It was in this moment that Zhuge Liang's true path as a strategist began to take shape. His role as Liu Bei's chief advisor would not just involve the intricacies of military strategy. It would also be shaped by his commitment to the people. Lady Wang's teachings had prepared him for this moment, for the complex dance of war and governance that he would soon engage in. While others around him focused solely on military might, Zhuge Liang understood that true leadership was about more than victory on the battlefield. It was about winning the hearts and minds of the people, ensuring that every decision was made with their well-being in mind. In the months that followed, Zhuge Liang's influence on Liu Bei's campaigns became increasingly evident. His strategic genius was unmatched, and his decisions on the battlefield helped to turn the tide in many crucial moments. But even as he orchestrated military victories, he never lost sight of the greater goal: to bring peace to the land, to reunite China under a just and benevolent ruler. Lady Wang's wisdom echoed in his mind as he faced these challenges: patience, humility, and the understanding that the end of war was not just victory, but peace. Zhuge Liang's leadership would become legendary, not because of his brilliance as a strategist, but because of the deep moral foundation that his mother had given him. But even as Zhuge Liang's role in the Shu Kingdom grew, his thoughts often turned to the lessons of his mother, lessons that would guide him throughout his life. Both on and off the battlefield, Lady Wang had taught him that the true measure of a man was not in the victories he achieved, but in how he served others. And so, Zhuge Liang continued to lead with wisdom and honor, knowing that his mother's teachings were the bedrock upon which his legacy was being built. The sun hung low in the sky as the forces of Liu Bei, under the strategic guidance of Zhuge Liang, moved swiftly through the dense forests of Jiangxi. The year was 208 AD, and the land of China was torn asunder by the greed of warlords and the ambition for power. It was a time of chaos, a time when every battlefield was a stage for the struggle of empires, and every decision could mean the difference between life and death. Liu Bei, having established a foothold in the southern region, was facing a critical moment in his quest to rebuild the Han Dynasty. His ambitions were noble, but the road ahead was fraught with challenges. Cao Cao, the most powerful warlord of the time, had already consolidated much of northern China, and his forces were poised to push southward, threatening Liu Bei's fragile stronghold. It was in this moment of peril that Zhuge Liang's wisdom would be called upon, and the Battle of Xinye would serve as the crucible in which his legendary status would be forged. The town of Xinye was situated on the banks of the Zhao River, a strategic location that controlled access to the southern provinces. It was here that Liu Bei and his forces took refuge, seeking to regroup and strengthen their hold in the region. But the enemy was closing in. Cao Cao's generals, famed for their military prowess, were already advancing, and the prospect of a direct confrontation seemed imminent. Zhuge Liang, despite his relatively young age, had become Liu Bei's most trusted advisor. His reputation as a master strategist had already spread throughout the land, and his advice was sought after by many. Yet, it was at Xinye that Zhuge Liang would truly prove his worth, not only as a brilliant military tactician but as a man of profound insight, whose decisions would have far-reaching consequences. As the news of Cao Cao's advancing forces reached the camp at Xinye, Liu Bei called for an immediate council of his top advisors. The room was filled with the generals and officers of his army, all of whom were eager to hear Zhuge Liang's thoughts on the situation. Many were anxious, fearing the overwhelming strength of Cao Cao's forces. Yet, Zhuge Liang remained calm and collected, his mind already at work, calculating the best course of action. "It is not brute force we need," Zhuge Liang said quietly, his voice cutting through the murmur of the council. It is strategy. And above all, patience. Cao Cao's army is strong. But they are not invincible. We must find a way to make our forces seem greater than they are. To create the illusion of strength where there is none. His words were met with some skepticism. The generals knew that Cao Cao's army was vast. Its reputation for swift and decisive victories nearly unmatched. But Zhuge Liang's eyes gleamed with a quiet confidence. And they listened carefully as he laid out his plan. We will fortify our defenses and create traps to deceive the enemy. But more importantly, we will use their arrogance against them. He explained, Cao Cao believes that a quick strike will win him the day. We must make him overestimate his strength, causing him to overextend his forces. We will act, not when he expects it, but when he least suspects it. The room fell silent as Zhuge Liang's plan began to take shape. He had studied Cao Cao's tactics thoroughly, and he knew that the warlord's confidence often led him to make rash decisions. The key, Zhuge Liang believed, was to create a sense of inevitability, something that would make Cao Cao believe he had no choice but to attack. Even when the situation was not in his favor. Zhuge Liang's plan centered around the careful use of misinformation and psychological tactics. He suggested that they create false reports of their army's strength, spreading rumors that they had reinforcements on the way. By ensuring that Cao Cao's scouts were misled, they could make it seem as though Liu Bei had an advantage, thus forcing the enemy to move too quickly and too recklessly. But it was not just deception that Zhuge Liang relied on. He also understood the importance of maintaining discipline and morale within his own ranks. He knew that his soldiers, though loyal, were vastly outnumbered and had fewer resources than Cao Cao's forces. The key, he believed, was to keep them focused and resolute, ensuring that they were prepared for the inevitable battles ahead. The days leading up to the battle were tense. Liu Bei's army, under the careful guidance of Zhuge Liang, worked tirelessly to prepare the defenses. They set up false positions, creating the illusion of a larger force. They sent out decoy patrols and planted rumors among the local population that reinforcements were coming. Zhuge Liang's ability to maintain calm amidst the growing pressure was a testament to the strength of his character. A strength that had been cultivated over years of learning under his mother, Lady Wang. As Cao Cao's forces approached Xinye, the tension in the air was palpable. Zhuge Liang's plan had been set in motion. And now, all that was left was to wait. The enemy, believing they had the advantage, marched forward with great confidence, unaware that they were walking into a trap. The battle began with a series of skirmishes on the outskirts of the town. Cao Cao's generals, confident in their numerical superiority, pressed forward without caution. But Zhuge Liang had anticipated this. He had positioned his forces strategically, ensuring that each move by the enemy would be met with resistance at just the right moment. It was not a battle of brute force, but a battle of wits, of strategy and cunning. As the day wore on, Cao Cao's forces grew more aggressive, and Zhuge Liang's traps were sprung. False reinforcements were reported, and the enemy's lines became disjointed. Liu Bei's forces, though outnumbered, fought with unparalleled discipline, while Zhuge Liang's deceptions created a sense of confusion and chaos within the ranks of Cao Cao's army. By the time night fell, Cao Cao's generals were in disarray. They had underestimated their opponents, believing the rumors of Liu Bei's strength had been exaggerated. But they soon realized that the opposite was true. Their own strategy had been flawed. Zhuge Liang's brilliance had outmaneuvered them at every turn, forcing them into a battle they had no hope of winning. As Cao Cao's forces retreated, defeated but not broken, Zhuge Liang stood silently at the edge of the battlefield, watching the enemy withdraw. His mind was already turning to the next phase of the campaign. But in that moment, there was a brief feeling of satisfaction. The battle had been won, not through brute force, but through strategy, the very strategy that had been cultivated over years of study and wisdom. Liu Bei, upon hearing of the victory, sent for Zhuge Liang at once. The warlord was elated by the outcome, and when Zhuge Liang entered his tent, he was met with applause and praise from the generals. But Zhuge Liang remained as humble as ever. "This victory is not mine alone," he said quietly. "It belongs to every soldier who fought bravely and to the people we seek to protect." The true victory lies in ensuring that we do not repeat the mistakes of the past, and that we stay true to the ideals we hold dear. Liu Bei nodded in agreement. He knew that this victory was only the beginning of the long road ahead. But it was a crucial step, one that demonstrated not only the strength of Zhuge Liang's intellect but also the power of his character. Shaped over years of careful guidance by his mother, the Battle of Xinye would become one of the defining moments of Zhuge Liang's life. It was here that he proved to the world, and to himself, that his destiny was not merely that of a scholar or an advisor, but of a leader whose wisdom would guide the fate of an empire. But more than that, it was the moment when Lady Wang's teachings truly came to life in the heat of battle: patience, strategy, and, above all, the understanding that true strength lay not in sheer force, but in the ability to see the world as it could be, rather than as it seemed. The winds of war swept relentlessly across the land, and as Zhuge Liang's reputation grew, so did the intensity of the forces converging upon Liu Bei's fledgling state. The battle for supremacy had entered a new phase. Despite the victories that had bolstered Liu Bei's morale, the road ahead was still uncertain. Yet, amidst the chaos and uncertainty of the three kingdoms, there came a moment, an encounter, that would change the trajectory of history. It was during this time of uncertainty that Liu Bei's messenger arrived at Zhuge Liang's humble residence in the region of Longzong, bringing with him a letter from the warlord himself. It was a moment that would solidify Zhuge Liang's path, binding his fate to that of Liu Bei, a man with whom he had yet to meet but whose ambitions were now aligned with his own ideals. The letter from Liu Bei was brief but laden with hope and recognition. Zhuge Liang, it read, "Your name has reached my ears, and I have heard much of your wisdom and character. Though the road ahead is fraught with peril, I believe that with your guidance, we may restore the Han Dynasty and unite the land under a just rule. I invite you to join me in my cause. Together, we will shape the future." Zhuge Liang had long anticipated such a moment. He had heard of Liu Bei's ideals, his commitment to the people, and his quest to restore order in a land ravaged by warlords and ambition. Yet, even as his heart stirred with a sense of duty, he understood that this was not merely an opportunity to serve a great ruler, but a calling that resonated with the teachings of his mother, Lady Wang. Zhuge Liang had been raised with the understanding that true leadership was not about power or personal glory, but about service to the people and dedication to a cause greater than oneself. Liu Bei's invitation was not just an offer to join a warlord's campaign. It was an opportunity to shape the future of China and to fight for the principles of justice and benevolence that Lady Wang had instilled in him. But Zhuge Liang was no fool. He had witnessed the rise and fall of many warlords, the fickleness of alliances, and the instability of the realm. He knew that to align himself with Liu Bei would not be without its challenges. He needed to assess Liu Bei's character, his resolve, and the potential of the alliance. And so, Zhuge Liang made the decision to travel to Liu Bei's camp. Upon his arrival, he was greeted with both respect and curiosity. Liu Bei's generals were eager to meet the man who had captured their leader's attention. Yet, despite the fanfare and the excitement, Zhuge Liang remained calm and composed. He had no interest in grandeur or accolades. His focus was singular: to understand the man who had invited him to join his cause, to assess his worthiness, and to determine if this alliance was truly one that would fulfill the greater purpose Zhuge Liang had envisioned. The first meeting between Zhuge Liang and Liu Bei was nothing short of historic. Liu Bei, though a man of high status, was humble and earnest in his approach. The two men stood before each other, silently sizing one another up. Zhuge Liang, despite his youthful appearance, carried an air of quiet wisdom, while Liu Bei's demeanor exuded sincerity and warmth. Liu Bei broke the silence, his voice filled with both respect and anticipation. "Zhuge Liang," Liu Bei began, "I have heard of your wisdom, and I have come to believe that you are the key to restoring the Han Dynasty. My cause is righteous, but I need your guidance to ensure that we are not led astray. Will you stand by my side?" Zhuge Liang considered the question carefully. The weight of the moment hung heavy in the air, for it was not simply a matter of joining a cause. It was a matter of aligning oneself with a vision for the future. A vision that could either bring peace or plunge the land deeper into chaos. His thoughts turned inward, Reflecting on the lessons his mother had taught him, she had always emphasized that the path of leadership was not for the faint of heart. It required sacrifice, integrity, and an unwavering commitment to the people. After a long pause, Zhuge Liang nodded, his decision made. "My lord," he said with quiet conviction, "I have studied your cause, and I believe it is one worth fighting for. If we are to restore the Han, we must not only seek power but uphold righteousness, justice, and the well-being of the people. I will lend you my counsel and my loyalty. For the future of this land depends not on the ambitions of warlords, but on the strength of virtue." Liu Bei, deeply moved by Zhuge Liang's words, extended his hand in a gesture of trust and partnership. "Then together, we shall restore what has been lost. With your wisdom, I believe we can overcome any obstacle." In that moment, an unspoken bond was forged between the two men. A bond that would transcend the struggles and sacrifices that lay ahead. Zhuge Liang's decision to join Liu Bei was not based on personal gain or ambition, but on a deep-seated belief that this alliance held the potential to restore peace to a fractured land. He understood that the road ahead would be fraught with difficulties, but he also knew that the path of righteousness and justice was one worth pursuing. For Zhuge Liang, this meeting was not merely a turning point in his own life. It was the beginning of a greater journey, a journey that would see him rise to become one of the greatest strategists in Chinese history. A man whose name would be remembered for centuries to come. But in the quiet depths of his heart, he knew that his path was still guided by the wisdom and values his mother, Lady Wang, had instilled in him from an early age. Lady Wang's influence, though distant in physical presence, remained ever constant in Zhuge Liang's decisions. Her teachings on loyalty, honor, and the importance of serving the greater good had shaped the very core of his being. It was these principles that would guide him through the darkest days of war, when the weight of leadership seemed almost unbearable. As Zhuge Liang pledged his loyalty to Liu Bei, he also vowed to honor the legacy of his mother, whose wisdom and guidance had prepared him for this moment. He knew that this was not just a battle for power, but a battle for the soul of China itself. And with Liu Bei at his side, Zhuge Liang would face whatever challenges came their way, for he understood that the true measure of a leader was not in the victories won, but in the hearts and minds of those they served. As Zhuge Liang pledged his loyalty to Liu Bei and became an integral part of his council, the weight of responsibility grew heavier. The world around them was a battleground, a relentless clash of ambition and ideologies. While Liu Bei possessed the ideals of righteousness and benevolence, he lacked the military might to challenge the more powerful warlords. The survival of his fledgling kingdom, and the eventual restoration of the Han Dynasty, depended not on sheer strength, but on the strategic genius of Zhuge Liang, whose counsel would prove to be as invaluable as any weapon in battle. It was not long before Liu Bei recognized that Zhuge Liang's brilliance extended far beyond military strategy. His insights into governance, diplomacy, and the delicate art of negotiation were pivotal in stabilizing Liu Bei's position and gaining the support of key allies. The land was filled with rival factions, each vying for dominance, and alliances shifted as quickly as the winds. In such a volatile environment, Zhuge Liang's ability to navigate the complexities of human nature became as important as any battlefield victory. The first real test of Zhuge Liang's influence came after the fall of the warlord Dong Zhuo. With his death, the political landscape of China had fractured even further, leaving an opening for ambitious men like Cao Cao to seize control. The kingdom of Shu, under Liu Bei's banner, remained small and fragile, and Zhuge Liang knew that it would take more than just military strength to survive in the face of such overwhelming odds. It would take alliances, carefully forged and managed, if Liu Bei were to maintain his footing in the ever-changing world of the Three Kingdoms. One of Zhuge Liang's first major strategic moves was to secure an alliance with Sun Quan, the ruler of the eastern lands. Sun Quan was a powerful figure in his own right, but his interests often conflicted with those of Liu Bei. The two leaders had once been enemies, but Zhuge Liang saw the potential for collaboration. If Liu Bei and Sun Quan could unite, their combined strength would be enough to challenge the power of Cao Cao. However, it was not enough to simply offer an alliance. Zhuge Liang knew that he had to ensure that the foundation of this alliance was built on trust. mutual respect, and shared goals. Zhuge Liang's diplomatic skills came to the forefront as he negotiated with the Sun family. Knowing that their cooperation was crucial, he was calm, respectful, and persistent, carefully listening to the concerns of the Sun generals and offering solutions that aligned with both Liu Bei's and Sun Quan's objectives. His ability to bridge the gap between the two warlords, who had once been bitter rivals, was a testament to his political acumen. It was this rare combination of military genius and diplomatic insight that set Zhuge Liang apart from others in the world of warlords. In the end, the alliance was secured through Zhuge Liang's intervention. The landmark agreement between Liu Bei and Sun Quan, forged during the Battle of Red Cliffs, would prove to be a pivotal moment in the history of the Three Kingdoms. While the victory itself was a direct result of the combined forces of Liu Bei and Sun Quan's armies, it was Zhuge Liang's strategy and foresight that had turned the tide in their favor. His plan, which included the use of fireships to destroy Cao Cao's fleet, was one of the most brilliant military maneuvers in Chinese history. It was a victory that not only secured Liu Bei's position in the south, but it also cemented Zhuge Liang's reputation as a mastermind of war and diplomacy. But despite this great victory, Zhuge Liang knew that the future of the kingdom was not secure. Cao Cao, though temporarily defeated, was still a formidable foe, and his ambitions had not been quelled by a single loss. Zhuge Liang understood that true victory would not come from a single battle, but from a long-term strategy, one that involved both military and political maneuvering. As Liu Bei's chief advisor, Zhuge Liang now had the authority to reshape the course of the Three Kingdoms in ways that would reverberate for generations. Under Zhuge Liang's guidance, Liu Bei's realm slowly began to stabilize. He worked tirelessly to build an administration that was not only efficient but also rooted in the principles of justice and benevolence. His administrative reforms were designed to strengthen the kingdom's infrastructure and economy, ensuring that the people's needs were met. The land had been ravaged by years of warfare, and Zhuge Liang knew that the recovery of the kingdom would require more than just the sword, it would require careful governance. Zhuge Liang also focused on strengthening Liu Bei's internal alliances. He recognized that the loyalty of Liu Bei's generals and advisors was crucial to the stability of the kingdom. He personally worked to resolve any conflicts that arose among them, always prioritizing the unity of the kingdom over personal ambition. His wisdom in dealing with internal politics ensured that Liu Bei's government remained cohesive, and his loyalty to the ruler was unwavering. But Zhuge Liang's role went beyond mere administration. He had become the embodiment of Liu Bei's ideals, the bridge between the military and the civilian realms. While Liu Bei remained the figurehead of the kingdom, it was Zhuge Liang's guidance that provided the kingdom with the direction and structure it needed to survive. His influence was far-reaching, whether it was on the battlefield, in the council chambers, or in the hearts of the people. Zhuge Liang had become indispensable to Liu Bei's success. Despite his growing importance, Zhuge Liang remained humble. He was never one to seek recognition for his contributions. His greatest satisfaction came from seeing Liu Bei's kingdom grow stronger and the people's lives improve. His mother's teachings, which emphasized service to the greater good, continued to guide his every decision. Zhuge Liang had become not just a strategist, but a man whose heart was aligned with the very principles that had guided him since his youth. But Zhuge Liang's path was not without its challenges. As Liu Bei's power grew, so did the threats from outside forces. Cao Cao, though temporarily weakened, would not sit idle. Zhuge Liang knew that the kingdom of Shu could not afford to rest on its laurels. The battles ahead would be even more difficult, and he would need all of his wisdom and skill to ensure the survival of Liu Bei's kingdom. It was during this period of relative peace that Zhuge Liang began to prepare for the future. He knew that the road ahead would be fraught with difficulties, but he also understood that his actions today would shape the kingdom's destiny for generations to come. He began to lay the groundwork for a more secure and prosperous future, strengthening the kingdom's economy, military, and alliances, and ensuring that the people were cared for. His work was tireless, and his commitment to Liu Bei's cause was unshakable. In these early days of Zhuge Liang's role as Liu Bei's chief advisor, the kingdom of Shu found stability amidst the chaos. It was a fragile peace, but it was a peace that had been built on a foundation of wisdom, strategy, and a deep commitment to the greater good. Zhuge Liang had become Liu Bei's greatest asset, not just for his military brilliance, but for his unwavering loyalty to the vision of a restored Han Dynasty. A vision that had been shaped by the teachings of Lady Wang. And as Zhuge Liang looked ahead to the challenges that awaited, he knew that the fate of the kingdom, and the future of China, rested in the choices he would make. His path was not just one of military victory, but one of virtue, strategy, and honor. He had come a long way from the quiet halls of his childhood home. But the lessons his mother had taught him remained as clear as ever. True power, he knew, lay not in dominance, but in wisdom and compassion. The winds of war never ceased to blow across the land, and as Liu Bei's kingdom slowly began to grow in strength, the pressure to maintain unity and stability became increasingly evident. The three kingdoms were not merely battling for dominance on the battlefield. The struggle for survival extended deep into the realm of alliances, diplomacy, and the balance of internal power. In such a volatile environment, Zhuge Liang's quiet influence would become more crucial than ever. His role as Liu Bei's most trusted advisor was no longer just about crafting military strategies or advising on governance. It was about preserving the very fabric of the kingdom itself. Though Liu Bei's kingdom, Shu, had emerged victorious at the Battle of Red Cliffs and solidified its alliance with Sun Quan, the reality of this fragile peace was ever present. Cao Cao, though suffering defeats, had not been permanently weakened. His ambition and power were still formidable, and his forces were constantly seeking to gain the upper hand. In addition to external threats, the internal dynamics within Liu Bei's kingdom also posed challenges. The loyalty of generals, the distribution of power, and the balance between military and civilian leadership were all delicate issues that Zhuge Liang would have to manage with deft hands. It was during this period of internal and external pressure that Zhuge Liang's true genius began to shine in a different way. While many warriors fought with swords, and many rulers governed with laws, Zhuge Liang understood that true unity within a kingdom required more than just victories and rules. It required understanding, trust, and the ability to unite people behind a common purpose. The political climate of the time, steeped in rivalry and mistrust, was a breeding ground for dissent. However, Zhuge Liang had learned from his mother, Lady Wang, that the greatest leaders were those who could inspire loyalty not through fear, but through wisdom and fairness. Zhuge Liang's influence began to extend beyond military matters. He became a pivotal figure in the political landscape, a quiet force working behind the scenes to secure loyalty and resolve conflicts within Liu Bei's ranks. His ability to mediate disputes and negotiate settlements became legendary. He knew that in a kingdom as fragile as Shu, disunity could bring everything crashing down. One of the earliest examples of Zhuge Liang's ability to maintain unity occurred within the ranks of Liu Bei's generals. Guan Yu, Zhang Fei, and Zhao Yun were all brilliant warriors, loyal to Liu Bei to the core, but they were also independent men with strong wills. Disagreements among these generals were not uncommon, and at times, the tensions between them threatened to undermine the unity of Liu Bei's army. It was Zhuge Liang who, with his usual calm demeanor, intervened in these moments of discord. He understood that the generals' pride and honor were at stake, but he also knew that their loyalty to Liu Bei must come first. Zhuge Liang used his knowledge of human nature to appeal to their sense of duty and respect for their leader. He was patient and methodical, never forcing anyone's hand, but instead guiding them toward mutual understanding. During one particular dispute between Guan Yu and Zhang Fei, Zhuge Liang summoned them both and quietly listened to their grievances. With his characteristic humility, he never once raised his voice. He reminded them of the higher purpose they shared, the restoration of the Han Dynasty, and the sacrifices they had all made to that cause. He framed their disagreement not as a personal issue, but as a challenge that could be overcome through unity. By the end of their conversation, both men were able to put aside their differences, understanding that the kingdom's survival was more important than any personal pride. While Zhuge Liang's influence was often indirect, it was always powerful. His diplomacy extended to every corner of the kingdom, from military leaders to the common people. In this period of his life, Zhuge Liang became a symbol of unity and harmony, a leader who guided the kingdom not through force, but through understanding and wisdom. It was not just within the ranks of his generals that Zhuge Liang worked to foster unity. The kingdom itself, though steadily growing, faced the challenge of integrating the diverse regions it controlled. Different provinces, each with their own customs and cultures, required careful governance. Zhuge Liang understood that the key to long-term stability was not just a military victory, but a peaceful coexistence among the people. His approach to governance was one of pragmatism and fairness, ensuring that local leaders had a voice in the administration while maintaining central authority. This careful balancing act ensured that the people felt represented, while also safeguarding the kingdom's integrity. Lady Wang's influence on Zhuge Liang's approach to governance was never more apparent than in these moments. She had always emphasized the importance of balance, of knowing when to act decisively, and when to wait and listen. In every decision, Zhuge Liang took the time to consider the perspectives of all involved, whether it was a simple policy change or a matter of military strategy. He always sought the most harmonious solution. His ability to see the bigger picture, his understanding that true leadership meant ensuring the well-being of all, not just the few, was a direct reflection of his mother's teachings. As the years passed, Zhuge Liang's position in Liu Bei's court grew ever more solidified. His influence extended beyond the political realm and into the hearts of the people. He had become not only the kingdom's greatest strategist but also a moral compass, guiding Liu Bei's leadership with wisdom and honor. His ability to maintain the delicate balance between military power, governance, and the people's needs became the cornerstone of the kingdom's stability. Yet, despite his growing influence, Zhuge Liang never sought glory for himself. His focus remained on the future, on ensuring that Liu Bei's vision for a united China could survive the trials that lay ahead. His personal sacrifices, too, were great. As Liu Bei grew older, Zhuge Liang found himself taking on more and more of the kingdom's responsibilities. His health began to decline under the strain, but his determination never wavered. His love for the people, his commitment to Liu Bei's cause, and his unwavering faith in the vision of a restored Han Dynasty drove him to continue his work, even when the weight of leadership seemed unbearable. In these years, Zhuge Liang's quiet influence was felt not only within the walls of Liu Bei's court but throughout the land. His reputation grew, and soon his name was spoken with respect and reverence across the kingdom. Yet, he remained humble. He understood that his work was far from over, and that the future of the kingdom would be determined by more than just his intellect. It would be determined by the collective effort of all those who shared the dream of a unified China. As the years wore on, the unity Zhuge Liang had worked so hard to foster would be tested again and again. But for now, the kingdom stood strong, thanks in large part to the quiet wisdom and unyielding dedication of a man who had long ago learned that true strength lay not in force, but in unity, compassion, and the ability to see beyond the moment to the future that could be. Lady Wang's teachings still resonated in Zhuge Liang's every action, and as the kingdom of Shu continued to grow and develop under his guidance, he knew that his role was not simply that of a strategist or advisor, but as a keeper of the dream of a united, just, and prosperous empire. The land of China, once unified under the Han Dynasty, had been torn apart by warlords and ambition. Each faction sought dominance, and the future of the empire hung in the balance. The mighty Cao Cao, with his immense power in the north, had set his sights on the southern lands, determined to crush the resistance led by Liu Bei and Sun Quan. The stage was set for a decisive battle, one that would shape the future of the three kingdoms and cement the legacy of the men who fought for its survival. It was at the Battle of Red Cliffs that Zhuge Liang, Liu Bei's trusted strategist, would demonstrate the full extent of his genius. While the odds seemed insurmountable, Cao Cao's forces were vast, his fleet enormous, and his resources virtually unlimited. It was Zhuge Liang's strategic brilliance that would turn the tide in favor of Liu Bei and Sun Quan. This battle, more than any other, would define Zhuge Liang not only as a military genius but as a symbol of hope for the forces that fought against tyranny. The riverbanks of the Red Cliffs, located on the Yangtze River, had long been a place of trade and passage, but in the winter of 208 AD, they would become the stage for a battle that would determine the fate of China. Cao Cao, having successfully unified the north, believed that a swift conquest of the south would secure his position as the ruler of all of China. He brought a fleet of over 800,000 men, confident that sheer numbers would crush any resistance in his path. On the opposing side stood the alliance of Liu Bei and Sun Quan, two forces united not by the strength of their armies, but by their shared desire to restore the Han Dynasty and defeat the tyrant Cao Cao. Despite their smaller numbers, the two armies were determined to stand their ground, knowing that the fate of their kingdoms rested on their success. At the heart of this alliance stood Zhuge Liang, whose strategic vision would become the key to their survival. The situation was dire. Cao Cao's army was not only larger but had the advantage of experience, and they had already secured the initiative. Liu Bei's forces, though resolute, were vastly outnumbered, and the terrain along the river posed additional challenges. But Zhuge Liang, ever the strategist, saw an opportunity where others saw only danger. Zhuge Liang knew that a direct confrontation with Cao Cao's forces would be catastrophic. Cao Cao had already shown his ability to dominate the battlefield, and any open engagement would be a battle of attrition, one that Liu Bei's forces could not afford to lose. Instead, Zhuge Liang crafted a plan that would use the environment itself as an ally, turning the very river against Cao Cao's might. The first step in Zhuge Liang's plan was to convince Sun Quan to unite with Liu Bei for a joint defense of the south. The two leaders had once been bitter rivals, but Zhuge Liang's diplomatic skills, honed over years of quiet negotiation, ensured that the alliance was solidified. Together, Liu Bei and Sun Quan would fight not only for their own survival but for the future of the Han Dynasty. With the alliance formed, Zhuge Liang set his sights on the next step, the battle itself. He knew that Cao Cao's fleet, though vast, was vulnerable to fire, and the damp weather of the season would make it difficult for the enemy to effectively respond to any incendiary attacks. With his keen understanding of the terrain and his knowledge of naval warfare, Zhuge Liang devised a plan to use fireships as weapons. Zhuge Liang's plan was deceptively simple in its brilliance. He had his forces craft several ships filled with dry wood, straw, and other inflammable materials, and set them adrift on the river, targeting Cao Cao's fleet. These ships would be sent toward the enemy's armada, set ablaze, and ignited by the winds. The fire ships would then create chaos and confusion among Cao Cao's forces, setting his fleet alight and disorienting his commanders. However, this plan required careful timing and perfect coordination. Zhuge Liang knew that the fire ships would only succeed if they were unleashed at the right moment. If Cao Cao's forces were too prepared, the plan would fail. If they were too complacent, the fire ships might miss their mark. But Zhuge Liang's foresight and understanding of Cao Cao's overconfidence in his forces proved to be a crucial advantage. The night before the battle, Zhuge Liang's forces carefully positioned the fireships. The wind was in their favor, and everything seemed to align perfectly. The plan was set into motion. As dawn broke on the day of the battle, the sky was overcast, with a chill in the air. The river's surface was calm, and Cao Cao's fleet was arrayed confidently in a seemingly impenetrable formation. Cao Cao, believing his victory was assured, gave little thought to any threat posed by Liu Bei's forces. However, Zhuge Liang had carefully timed his strike. As the fireships drifted downriver, the flames began to spread, carried by the wind straight toward Cao Cao's fleet. The fire, fueled by the dry materials, quickly engulfed the ships, creating chaos and confusion among Cao Cao's sailors. The wind pushed the flames relentlessly toward the heart of his fleet, causing panic and disorder among the ranks. Ships were set ablaze, and in the chaos, Cao Cao's forces were thrown into disarray. In the ensuing confusion, Liu Bei and Sun Quan's armies launched a full assault. Cao Cao, his forces unable to regain control of the situation, was forced into retreat. The once mighty fleet, a symbol of his overwhelming power, was reduced to ashes. Zhuge Liang's brilliant use of fireships had completely altered the course of the battle. The Battle of Red Cliffs was a resounding victory for Liu Bei and Sun Quan. The combined forces had successfully repelled Cao Cao's invasion, and in doing so, they secured the south for the time being. The battle proved not only the superiority of Zhuge Liang's strategy but also the strength of his character. Where others had seen only a battle of brute force, Zhuge Liang saw a way to outsmart the enemy and turn the very forces of nature against them. For Zhuge Liang, this victory was not just a military triumph. It was the culmination of years of study, strategy, and wisdom, a testament to the teachings of his mother, Lady Wang, who had instilled in him the belief that true strength was found in the mind and in the heart, not just in numbers or weapons. The Battle of Red Cliffs solidified Zhuge Liang's legacy as one of the greatest strategists in Chinese history. And his reputation spread far and wide. As Liu Bei and Sun Quan celebrated their victory, Zhuge Liang remained calm and focused, ever mindful of the future. He knew that while this battle was won, the war was far from over. Cao Cao would not be easily deterred, and the challenges ahead would require every ounce of wisdom and strength he possessed. But for now, Zhuge Liang could take solace in the knowledge that his plan had succeeded beyond expectations. The victory at Red Cliffs was not just a battle won, but a crucial turning point in the struggle for the future of China. The dust had barely settled after the victory at Red Cliffs when the weight of leadership grew heavier for Liu Bei and his kingdom. The alliance with Sun Quan had secured the southern territories, but it had also drawn the attention of Cao Cao, who was intent on consolidating his power in the north, while Zhuge Liang had masterminded the defense and turned the tide of battle at Red Cliffs. His task was far from over. Liu Bei's kingdom, though solidified in the south, was still fragile, and the future of the Han Dynasty depended on navigating the shifting tides of power. As time passed, Liu Bei's ambition for the restoration of the Han Dynasty only grew stronger. With his lands secured, he turned his sights to the western regions, particularly the rich and strategically important province of Yi, in modern-day Sichuan. In 214 AD, Liu Bei successfully captured the region from its nominal ruler, the warlord Zhang Lu, and established his base of power there. But the success was bittersweet, for it came at a great cost. Though Liu Bei had expanded his territory, he also found himself increasingly burdened by the complexities of governance and the health issues that had been plaguing him for some time. It was during these years of territorial consolidation that Liu Bei's health began to deteriorate rapidly. The stresses of ruling, coupled with the relentless nature of warfare, took their toll. His body, once strong and capable of enduring the rigors of battle, began to show signs of age, and as Liu Bei's condition worsened, the future of his kingdom and his vision for the restoration of the Han Dynasty began to hang in the balance. Zhuge Liang, ever watchful and loyal, was quick to recognize the gravity of the situation. He had served Liu Bei not just as a strategist and advisor, but as a trusted confidant. In their many private conversations, Zhuge Liang had always been forthright about the challenges ahead. Now, with Liu Bei's declining health, Zhuge Liang understood that he would be called upon not just as an advisor, but as the man who would have to shoulder the responsibility of Liu Bei's legacy. In 223 AD, Liu Bei died after a prolonged illness. The news was a devastating blow not only to his kingdom but to the ideals he had championed. For Zhuge Liang, the loss was deeply personal. Liu Bei was not only his lord, he had become a father figure. A man whose vision for the future had inspired all those who followed him. With Liu Bei's death, the weight of the kingdom now rested on the shoulders of his son, Liu Shan, a young and inexperienced ruler who lacked the political acumen and military experience to navigate the treacherous waters of the three kingdoms. As the new ruler of Shu, Liu Shan was ill-prepared for the challenges ahead. While he had inherited his father's name, he did not possess his father's ability to inspire loyalty or his understanding of the complexities of statecraft. It was clear to Zhuge Liang that the future of Shu now depended on him, on his ability to guide the young emperor, to maintain the unity of the kingdom, and to defend it against the ever-encroaching forces of Cao Cao's successors. Zhuge Liang's role changed dramatically after Liu Bei's death. No longer just a strategist, he was now the acting regent of the Shu Kingdom, tasked with protecting Liu Shan's rule and ensuring the survival of their cause. It was a heavy burden to bear, and Zhuge Liang knew that the path ahead would be fraught with challenges. The forces of Wei, now under the leadership of Cao Pi, were more formidable than ever, and the balance of power between the three kingdoms remained volatile. Despite the challenges, Zhuge Liang remained steadfast in his resolve. His loyalty to Liu Bei's vision of a restored Han Dynasty was unwavering. It was a vision that now needed to be carried forward, not just through military might but through wise governance, diplomacy, and, most importantly, unity. Zhuge Liang knew that his actions, and the actions of the people around him, would determine the fate of the kingdom. Though Liu Shan was the emperor, Zhuge Liang became the true leader of the Shu Kingdom. His decisions shaped the policies of the state. His strategies determined the outcome of battles, and his diplomacy kept the fragile alliances intact. He took to his role with the same quiet dedication that had always marked his leadership. But with the rise of Zhuge Liang's influence, the expectations placed on him grew higher. He was no longer just a brilliant strategist, he was now the very heart of the Shu Kingdom. The man who would carry forward the dream of the Han Dynasty, alone. His first major challenge as regent came shortly after Liu Bei's death, when the kingdom of Wei began to take a more aggressive stance. Cao Pi, Cao Cao's son and the new emperor of Wei, had consolidated his power and sought to extend his reach. Zhuge Liang knew that direct confrontation with Wei was not an option at this point. The kingdom was still recovering from the loss of its leader and needed time to regain its strength. But he also knew that Shu could not remain passive forever. Zhuge Liang's first course of action was to strengthen the kingdom internally. He worked tirelessly to maintain the loyalty of the generals, fortify the defenses, and ensure that the kingdom's economy was stable, though his role as regent kept him away from the front lines of battle. His strategic mind never ceased its work. He was constantly preparing for the day when Shu would need to strike. But he understood that this day could not come until the kingdom was ready. Meanwhile, Zhuge Liang took it upon himself to oversee the education of Liu Shan. Understanding that the future of the kingdom would depend on the emperor's ability to rule wisely. Though Liu Shan lacked the natural leadership qualities of his father, Zhuge Liang worked with him patiently, teaching him the arts of governance, diplomacy, and the ways of a ruler. It was a delicate balancing act, as Zhuge Liang had to guide Liu Shan without overstepping his authority. As the years passed, Zhuge Liang's health, too, began to show signs of wear. The stress of leadership, combined with the years of relentless work, took a toll on him. Yet, despite his own physical decline, Zhuge Liang never once faltered in his commitment to the kingdom. He knew that his time was limited, and the pressure to ensure the kingdom's future weighed heavily on his shoulders. But he was determined to leave a legacy that would endure. A kingdom that would continue to fight for the ideals that Liu Bei had laid out. It was during this time that Zhuge Liang would embark on his famous northern campaigns. A series of military expeditions aimed at weakening the power of the Wei kingdom and securing Shu's future. Though these campaigns would ultimately fail to achieve their goals, they were a testament to Zhuge Liang's determination to protect the legacy of the Han Dynasty and his unshakable belief in the righteousness of his cause. As the years drew on, Zhuge Liang's health deteriorated further, and his workload became heavier. But his devotion to the kingdom and its people never wavered. In his final years, Zhuge Liang would not only guide Liu Shan through the trials of leadership but also ensure that the foundations of Shu were as strong as they could be. When Zhuge Liang passed away in 234 AD, it was not just the loss of a strategist but the loss of the very heart of the Shu kingdom. His death marked the end of an era, a time when the dreams of the Han Dynasty still flickered in the hearts of those who believed in its restoration. Though Shu would continue for many years after his death, it was never quite the same. Zhuge Liang's brilliance and integrity had shaped the kingdom's rise, and his absence left an undeniable void. Zhuge Liang's legacy, however, would never be forgotten. His name would live on through history, not only as a brilliant strategist but as a man whose wisdom, loyalty, and unwavering commitment to the greater good defined him as one of the greatest figures in Chinese history. After years of tireless service to Liu Bei and his dream of restoring the Han Dynasty, Zhuge Liang had seen the kingdom of Shu rise from the ashes of war. Yet, despite all the victories and alliances, the threat of Wei loomed ever larger on the horizon. The kingdom of Wei, under the leadership of Cao Pi and his successor, Cao Rui, had solidified its power in the north, and Zhuge Liang knew that only through action could the fragile peace of Shu be maintained. His mind, sharp and unwavering, had already begun to formulate the next stage of his strategy, the northern campaigns. Zhuge Liang's ambition for the restoration of the Han Dynasty was still as strong as ever. But he knew that achieving this goal would require more than just diplomacy and small victories. To secure Shu's future, it would need to weaken Wei and gain control over more territory. Especially in the north, it was a monumental task, and one that would require every ounce of Zhuge Liang's military genius, political savvy, and personal sacrifice. In 227 AD, Zhuge Liang began his first northern campaign. The goal was to weaken the northern forces of Wei and disrupt their control over key territories. The campaign was not just about military conquest, but about sending a message to the people of Shu, Wei, and the surrounding kingdoms, that the ideals of the Han Dynasty were still alive, and that Liu Bei's vision would continue, even without his presence. However, the campaign proved far more difficult than Zhuge Liang had anticipated. Despite his tactical brilliance, the terrain was difficult, the resources limited, and Wei's forces, although stretched thin, were still formidable. Zhuge Liang had to rely on every bit of his strategic acumen to overcome these challenges. Yet, despite his genius, the difficulties of war began to take their toll. The long marches, the logistical struggles, and the political challenges from within his own ranks began to weigh heavily on him. Zhuge Liang's first northern campaign, though it caused some initial gains, ultimately ended in stalemate. Despite his carefully crafted strategies and his personal leadership, Shu was unable to make significant headway into Wei-controlled territories. The campaign demonstrated just how difficult it would be to break Wei's hold on northern China. Though Zhuge Liang had achieved some tactical successes, the campaign had also exposed the limitations of Shu's military power, and the enormous challenges they faced in maintaining a war effort on multiple fronts. Despite the setbacks, Zhuge Liang did not falter. His resolve was unshaken. He returned to Shu, determined to continue the struggle. His sense of duty to Liu Bei's vision of a restored Han Dynasty drove him forward. Even when the costs were personal, his deep understanding of history, his awareness of the complex dynamics of the three kingdoms, and his unwavering commitment to his people pushed him to continue the fight. He knew that his work was far from over, and that each campaign, each failure, was just another step toward a greater goal. The years following the first northern campaign saw Zhuge Liang regroup, retool, and prepare for future military actions. He returned to the southern territories, solidified his position within Shu, and made several key reforms aimed at ensuring the stability of the kingdom in the face of Wei's growing strength. He knew that Shu could not afford to be complacent. The threat from Wei would only grow stronger with time, and so he focused on securing the kingdom's internal affairs, preparing for the day when he would lead another campaign. Zhuge Liang's health began to decline, but he continued to push forward. Ever the dutiful servant of the Han Dynasty, he maintained his strategy of slow, deliberate moves, and focused on strengthening Shu's defenses, both militarily and economically. But as the years wore on, the question of succession, of ensuring the future of the Han cause, became ever more pressing. Liu Shan, though the rightful ruler, lacked the strength and character of his father. He was a young emperor, with limited experience, and Zhuge Liang understood that his role as regent would ultimately be about securing the future. Not just for his own lifetime, but for generations to come. As time passed, the pressure on Zhuge Liang only grew. He did not just have to deal with external threats, but also with the strains within the kingdom. His advisors, generals, and even some of the people questioned his strategy, doubted his military decisions, and some even resented his growing authority. But Zhuge Liang stood firm, always remembering the lessons his mother, Lady Wang, had taught him: patience, resilience, and a deep commitment to the greater good. In 228 AD, after years of preparation, Zhuge Liang launched his second northern campaign, this time targeting Wei's northern heartland with renewed determination. His goal was to further weaken Wei's control over key regions and gain more territory for Shu. This time, Zhuge Liang knew that his forces would have to move quickly and decisively to avoid getting bogged down in prolonged warfare. With his eyes fixed on the future, he meticulously planned every aspect of the campaign, ensuring that each move was calculated and purposeful. This second campaign was similarly fraught with difficulties. Despite Zhuge Liang's brilliance, the logistical challenges proved insurmountable. Wei's forces, though not as large, were highly organized, and their fortifications were formidable. Zhuge Liang, despite his careful planning, found that he could not push forward as quickly as he had hoped. The Second Northern Campaign also ended in a stalemate, with Zhuge Liang unable to capture any significant territories from Wei. But again, his resolve remained unbroken. He returned to Shu with a renewed sense of purpose. Knowing that the road to peace and the restoration of the Han Dynasty was long and filled with obstacles. In his later campaigns, Zhuge Liang's military actions became more strategic and defensive. His final northern campaign in 234 AD, just a few months before his death, was aimed at weakening Wei's western defenses. Though his forces fought valiantly, Zhuge Liang's health had deteriorated so severely that he could no longer command with the same vigor. His campaign ended in failure, and after returning to Shu, Zhuge Liang died of illness. His final years marked by the overwhelming weight of his responsibilities. His death marked the end of an era, though his military campaigns had not achieved the glory he had hoped for. His legacy was far greater than any single battle. His commitment to the Han cause, his loyalty to Liu Bei's vision, and his wisdom in leadership would be remembered for generations to come. His strategies, though not always successful, had shaped the future of Shu, and his name would go down in history as one of China's greatest tacticians. Even in his final years, Zhuge Liang continued to embody the values his mother, Lady Wang, had instilled in him: wisdom, patience, and an unwavering commitment to the greater good. His legacy would remain not only in his military strategies but in the moral compass he provided to those who followed him. Zhuge Liang's northern campaigns may have failed in their immediate goals, but they stood as a testament to his dedication and to the enduring hope of the Han Dynasty. Zhuge Liang's final years were marked by constant struggle, not only on the battlefield but in the delicate art of governance. After his series of northern campaigns failed to achieve the desired results, Zhuge Liang's focus shifted even more toward the internal affairs of the Shu Kingdom. With Liu Bei's death and Liu Shan's ascension to the throne, the kingdom's future was precariously perched on a knife's edge. The lands that Liu Bei had fought so hard to secure were vulnerable to both internal strife and external threats. While Zhuge Liang had always been a master of military strategy, it was during these final years that his true greatness as a leader would be tested in an entirely different realm: governance. The kingdoms of Wei and Wu were constantly vying for control, and in the midst of this volatile period, Zhuge Liang was called upon to do more than just lead armies. He had to ensure the kingdom's stability, maintain its economy, and manage its many factions. Zhuge Liang's first priority after his return from the northern campaigns was to solidify the internal workings of Shu. Although the kingdom had expanded its borders in the years following Liu Bei's death, the integration of new territories into the administrative structure proved to be a major challenge. Each region had its own traditions, and the loyalty of the people was not guaranteed. Ensuring that the local officials and military leaders remained loyal to the throne was a delicate task, one that required Zhuge Liang's unrivaled political skill. One of the first decisions Zhuge Liang made was to reinforce the system of merit-based appointments within the government. He had always believed that talent, not birth, should determine a person's role in the administration. As regent, he focused on selecting capable individuals for key positions, rather than simply relying on family connections or loyalty alone. His goal was to build a government that could stand the test of time, one that was stable, just, and fair. Zhuge Liang's administration was marked by a commitment to efficiency and justice. He enacted reforms that sought to strengthen the economy of Shu, focusing on agriculture, trade, and military production. He understood that without a solid economic foundation, the kingdom could not withstand the challenges posed by its enemies. To this end, he worked tirelessly to improve agricultural production, encouraging the people to cultivate the land to its fullest potential. At the same time, he worked to maintain the morale of the army, ensuring that the soldiers' needs were met and that they were always prepared for the challenges ahead. Despite these internal successes, Zhuge Liang faced persistent challenges from outside the kingdom. Wei, under the leadership of Cao Rui, remained a constant threat. always seeking opportunities to expand its influence over the southern regions. Wu, while an ally at times, was often a rival, and its naval superiority in the Yangtze River was a source of tension. The political landscape was a delicate balance, and Zhuge Liang was well aware that any misstep could lead to disaster. For all his political brilliance, however, Zhuge Liang's personal toll became increasingly evident. The weight of leadership, compounded by the failure of the northern campaigns and the constant pressure to maintain stability in the face of external and internal challenges, began to take a toll on his health. Though he pushed himself relentlessly, managing the day-to-day affairs of the kingdom, overseeing military strategies, and continually ensuring that the vision of the Han Dynasty lived on, his body was weakening. His once vibrant spirit, tempered by years of sacrifice and devotion, began to show the signs of strain. Zhuge Liang, however, never wavered in his dedication to his duties. His health continued to decline, but he remained a tireless figure within the walls of Shu, always leading from the front. Whether in the council chambers or in battle, his belief in the righteousness of the Han Dynasty remained unshaken. He knew that the legacy of Liu Bei, the vision for a restored, unified China under the banner of the Han, was still worth fighting for, even if it meant facing insurmountable odds. One of the most poignant moments in these later years came when Zhuge Liang took the step of appointing his successors. He knew that his time was running out, and he wanted to ensure that his work would be carried forward. His most trusted officials, generals, and advisors were tasked with taking up the mantle, each hand-picked for their skill, loyalty, and integrity. Among them was his loyal general, Wei Yan, and the capable strategist, Zhang Wei, both of whom would play critical roles in the later years of Shu. But Zhuge Liang's most personal decision was to ensure that Liu Shan, despite his lack of experience and strength, would be prepared to take over the kingdom in full. Zhuge Liang began to teach Liu Shan the finer points of leadership, though he was fully aware that the young emperor would never fully match the abilities of his father. In their private lessons, Zhuge Liang would often repeat the same advice: a ruler must be as much a servant of the people as he is a leader of them. Led by example, and the people will follow. While Liu Shan would struggle to carry the weight of the kingdom in the years to come, Zhuge Liang worked tirelessly to instill in him a sense of duty and understanding. As Zhuge Liang's health continued to deteriorate, he began to make his final preparations. He had fought for so long to restore the Han Dynasty, to guide Liu Shan, and to protect the kingdom of Shu. But he knew that his body was failing, and that the future of the kingdom would soon rest in the hands of others. He continued to give advice, maintain diplomatic relations with Wu, and secure Shu's borders. Even in his declining state, his commitment to the kingdom remained absolute. In 234 AD, the weight of his years of service finally caught up with him. Exhausted from the endless political and military struggles, Zhuge Liang fell ill during one of his final military campaigns, this time in the northern territories. He had been leading the Shu forces in an effort to weaken Wei's hold on their western frontier. But despite his best efforts, the toll of his leadership was too great. On the night of his death, Zhuge Liang, still resolute in his devotion to his duty, passed away at the age of 54, leaving behind a kingdom on the brink of collapse without his guiding hand. Zhuge Liang's death was met with an outpouring of grief throughout the kingdom of Shu. His name had become synonymous with wisdom, integrity, and unwavering loyalty to his cause. Even his enemies, who had often faced his brilliant strategies on the battlefield, respected him for his honor and intellect. His legacy would be remembered not just for his military victories or his administrative reforms, but for the principles he embodied throughout his life. In the years that followed, the kingdom of Shu would struggle without the guiding influence of Zhuge Liang. His passing marked the end of an era, but his teachings would continue to resonate within the hearts of those who had served him. Liu Shan, though incapable of leading Shu as his father had, would carry on the legacy of his mother's ideals, albeit not with the same brilliance as Zhuge Liang. The kingdom itself would eventually fall, but the memory of Zhuge Liang would endure as one of China's greatest statesmen. The passing of Zhuge Liang in 234 AD was not only the end of an era for Shu, but it was the end of a vision, a vision that had been carefully crafted by Liu Bei and nurtured by Zhuge Liang himself. With the death of the great strategist, the kingdom was left in a fragile state, vulnerable to the ambitions of neighboring powers. The once brilliant mind that had steered Shu through countless crises, victories, and defeats was now absent, and the burden of leadership fell squarely on the shoulders of those who remained. The final years of Zhuge Liang were marked by a profound sense of duty that never wavered. Even as his health faltered, despite his physical decline, Zhuge Liang's mind remained sharp. His focus was always on the future of Shu, the future of the Han Dynasty, and the legacy of Liu Bei. He knew that in his final days, he had to prepare his kingdom for the inevitable challenges that would arise once he was gone. In the aftermath of his death, the people of Shu mourned deeply. He had been a father figure not only to Liu Shan, but to the entire kingdom. His influence had shaped every aspect of governance, military strategy, and diplomacy. The soldiers, the scholars, and the common folk all recognized his greatness. His reputation as a strategist and administrator was unmatched, and his unwavering commitment to the Han Dynasty had made him a living legend. Yet, despite the reverence in which he was held, Zhuge Liang had always been a humble servant of the state. His quiet, unassuming nature hid the brilliance of his mind, and it was only after his death that many truly realized the magnitude of his contribution. Zhuge Liang's death left a vacuum that could not be easily filled. His successor, the young and inexperienced Liu Shan, struggled to fill the role of leader, as he had neither the strength of character nor the strategic brilliance of his father or Zhuge Liang. Liu Shan had inherited the throne through birthright, but his abilities as a ruler were limited. The kingdom of Shu, though still large and powerful, now lacked the guidance of its greatest leader. Zhuge Liang's absence was deeply felt, and his influence on the kingdom could no longer be as direct. In the wake of Zhuge Liang's death, many looked to the men who had served alongside him to fill the void. The generals, such as Wei Yan and Zhang Wei, as well as the ministers who had worked with Zhuge Liang, were tasked with carrying forward his legacy, but none of them possessed the unique combination of wisdom, vision, and loyalty that Zhuge Liang had brought to the table. They would continue to fight for the survival of Shu, but without their greatest strategist, the kingdom was vulnerable. One of the most significant aspects of Zhuge Liang's final years was his determination to continue his northern campaigns. Despite the toll it took on him, his health had already begun to deteriorate by the time he launched his final military expedition in 234 AD. Aiming to weaken Wei's western frontier, this final campaign, which took place near the northern borders of Shu, was a reflection of Zhuge Liang's tireless devotion to his cause. It was also an expression of his belief in the righteousness of the Han Dynasty's restoration. The campaign was marked by bold moves and calculated strategies, but it also revealed the limits of Zhuge Liang's physical endurance. Though Zhuge Liang's strategic mind remained sharp, his body could no longer keep up with the demands of war. His final campaign was a failure. The troops, though loyal, were weary, and the logistical challenges of the campaign proved insurmountable. By the time Zhuge Liang realized that the campaign could not be won, his condition had worsened. His health had deteriorated to such an extent that he could no longer lead his forces effectively. The campaign ended without any major territorial gains, and Zhuge Liang returned to the capital, Chengdu, where he would spend his last days. In his final moments, Zhuge Liang knew that his time had come. The burden of leadership, which he had carried for so long, had become too much for even his remarkable mind and spirit to bear. Despite his physical decline, he remained a pillar of strength for those around him. He continued to give advice, issue orders, and provide wisdom to the remaining leaders of Shu, ensuring that they would not forget the lessons he had taught them. Zhuge Liang's death was a somber occasion, but it also marked the end of a chapter in the history of Shu. His funeral was attended by his closest allies, his generals, and the people he had served so faithfully. There were no grand celebrations or displays of wealth, for Zhuge Liang had never sought personal glory. His legacy, however, was far-reaching. The kingdom of Shu mourned his passing, but they also knew that the ideals he had espoused would live on. In the days following his death, Liu Shan, though young and inexperienced, began to take up the mantle of leadership. The kingdom of Shu continued to exist, But the absence of Zhuge Liang left a void that would never truly be filled. His counsel had been a guiding light for Liu Bei's legacy. And without him, the future of Shu seemed uncertain. Though the kingdom continued to fight, the brilliant strategies and administrative genius of Zhuge Liang were sorely missed. The three kingdoms continued to exist in a precarious balance of power. Wei, under the leadership of Cao Rui and later Cao Fang, maintained its dominance in the north. Wu, led by Sun Quan and his descendants, continued to rule in the east. And Shu, now struggling to maintain its grip on power, fought valiantly to keep its independence. But despite the continuing efforts of Shu's generals and advisors, the kingdom could not recover from the loss of its greatest strategist. Zhuge Liang's legacy, however, was not one of military conquest or territorial expansion. His true legacy lay in the ideals he had upheld: loyalty, integrity, wisdom, and service to the greater good. He had never sought fame or recognition, but he had built a legacy that would endure through the ages. Even after his death, his name would be remembered as one of China's greatest figures. The teachings of Zhuge Liang lived on in the hearts of those who had served with him. His strategies, though not always successful in the short term, had shaped the course of history. His ability to balance war with governance, his dedication to the welfare of his people, and his unwavering commitment to the restoration of the Han Dynasty were the pillars of his greatness. His name became synonymous with wisdom and integrity, and generations would look to him as a model of leadership. Though Zhuge Liang was gone, his influence would remain. The ideals he had fought for, the restoration of the Han, the unity of China, and the welfare of the people, would continue to inspire future generations of leaders. His death was the end of a chapter, but his legacy would never fade. The death of Zhuge Liang in 234 AD marked the end of a remarkable era, one in which the dreams of the Han Dynasty were kept alive by a single man's brilliance, loyalty, and devotion. But while Zhuge Liang's life had ended, his influence endured through the generations. His name would forever be associated with wisdom, strategy, and the virtues of righteousness that had guided him throughout his life. And behind it all, quiet, humble, and largely unseen, lay the source of Zhuge Liang's strength, the teachings and legacy of his mother, Lady Wang. As the kingdom of Shu moved forward without its greatest strategist, the lessons that Zhuge Liang had learned in his youth continued to shape the path of the kingdom. The people of Shu, though they mourned the loss of their beloved regent, never forgot the ideals he had fought for, the same ideals his mother, Lady Wang, had instilled in him from the very beginning. Lady Wang's influence, though not always visible, was woven into every decision Zhuge Liang made. Her wisdom, passed down through the years, had shaped the very core of his character. It was she who had taught him that true leadership was not about power or personal glory, but about service to the greater good. It was she who had instilled in him the belief that a leader's strength lay not in their ability to command, but in their ability to guide with compassion, humility, and integrity. And it was these very lessons that had made Zhuge Liang not only the greatest strategist of his time but also a man whose legacy would echo through history. After Zhuge Liang's death, the kingdom of Shu struggled to maintain the unity and strength he had brought. The collapse of the kingdom was inevitable, given the challenges from the powerful Wei and Wu, and the political instability that followed. Yet, even as the kingdom weakened and eventually fell, the principles Zhuge Liang had lived by remained in the hearts of the people, serving as a moral compass for future generations. Though Liu Shan's reign was not as successful as that of his father, Liu Bei, and the kingdom of Shu crumbled under the weight of internal divisions and external pressures, the ideals of Zhuge Liang and Lady Wang continued to resonate. Generations of leaders would look back on Zhuge Liang as a model of leadership, one who fought not for personal gain, but for the welfare of his people and the preservation of a just and unified empire. In the years that followed, as the Three Kingdoms period gave way to the Jin dynasty, the teachings of Zhuge Liang lived on through the military and political strategies that had defined his leadership. His approach to governance, merit-based appointments, the balance of power, and loyalty to the people, became the gold standard for rulers in the centuries to come. Historians and scholars would study his campaigns, his administration, and his leadership with reverence. attempting to capture the essence of his genius. But beyond his military prowess and political acumen, it was his deep moral conviction that set him apart. He had inherited this conviction from Lady Wang, who had not only taught him the value of education and strategy but also the importance of compassion and integrity. His mother's influence, quiet and steadfast, had formed the foundation of Zhuge Liang's greatness. And in the end, it was that same foundation, his commitment to serving the people, his unwavering loyalty to his principles, that made him immortal in the annals of history. Lady Wang's legacy, though often overshadowed by the grandeur of her son's achievements, was just as profound. She had shaped the mind of a man who would go on to change the course of history. Not through brute force or conquest, but through wisdom, strategy, and a heart devoted to the service of others. In this way, her influence was felt not only in Zhuge Liang's lifetime but in every moment of the kingdom of Shu's rise and fall. As the years passed, Lady Wang became a symbol of the quiet power of mothers who shape the future of their children through love, wisdom, and sacrifice. The story of Zhuge Liang, the brilliant strategist who fought to restore the Han Dynasty, could not be told without acknowledging the powerful role of Lady Wang in his life. She had taught him that strength was not only in one's mind but in one's character. She had shown him that true greatness lay in service to others, in the ability to lead with humility, and in the unwavering pursuit of justice and righteousness. Even as the kingdom of Shu eventually fell to the might of Wei and Wu, the ideals of Lady Wang, passed down through her son, continued to inspire leaders for generations. Her lessons lived on in the hearts of those who followed Zhuge Liang's path, men and women who sought to lead with integrity, wisdom, and compassion, just as he had. Zhuge Liang's story, intertwined with the legacy of Lady Wang, became a legend, a tale of loyalty, strategy, and the enduring power of wisdom. In the centuries to follow, his name would be remembered not only as a military genius but as a symbol of the eternal influence of a mother's love and guidance. Through him, Lady Wang's wisdom, strength, and vision continued to shape the world long after her death, reminding all who came after that true power lies not in what one achieves, but in how one serves the greater good. The legacy of Zhuge Liang and Lady Wang transcended time. Their influence continued to guide the hearts and minds of those who sought to create a world built on the principles of justice, wisdom, and integrity. It was a legacy that would live on long after the fall of Shu, forever shaping the ideals of leadership, sacrifice, and service to the people.